Thank you for the invitation. Over the past 300 years, ladies and gentlemen, humanity has succeeded in pulling itself up by the bootstraps, establishing wondrous scientific projects, and creating the technology and production lines that allowed us a glimpse of a bright future liberated from want. However, more recently, the same path has led us to the edge of a precipice from which we are staring into a hideous abyss. The key to rapid growth was a word beginning with C, commodification, the conversion of goods into commodities and their mass manufacture for profit. With the determination of an unscrupulous invader, for 300 years the market has been colonizing more and more realms of human activity. It created new assets, like ingenious new forms of debt, and it fully conquered the manufacture of things. Then, more recently, it penetrated areas that it was ill-equipped to treat with the due respect. It crossed several bridges too far. As we have already heard in this auditorium last night and earlier on, commodification entered the microcosm, altering the DNA of organisms in order to claim property rights over them, over creations of age-old evolution, of rainforests, of long-lived communities of farmers. Soon, commodification will take over, as we heard yesterday, the moon, even the sun, if it can. Once its greatest weapon, however, property rights. Property rights are the greatest weapon, an essential lever for commodification. Once property rights could no longer be defended by means of erecting good, strong, tall fences, and they started requiring innovative, complex, stochastic contracts, humanity entered new, treacherous, uncharted territory. In 1991, our own generation was taken aback by one surprising major upheaval: the collapse of a non-market, authoritarian, satrapic type of industrial society, the death of which proved that markets for well-defined material things are indispensable. For colorful clothes, desirable cars, decent cups of coffee, gizmos that open up new landscapes of pleasure, markets cannot be second-guessed. 1991 unveiled Karl Marx's error. To each according to her needs makes for a gray existence, and moreover requires that somebody else is entrusted with the role, the task of second-guessing what these individual needs are. Alas, at that moment, at the moment of the market's final triumph in 1991, rumors of history's passing were greatly exaggerated. The vengefulness of markets was biding its time. It unleashed itself 17 years later, 2 years ago, in 2008. Capitalism, the ultimate C word, came belly up 2 years ago. State power came to its rescue. But what we now have, I submit, in this exciting post-2008 phase of our history is not capitalism. Arguably, we live under a new kind of regime, which we may call bankocracy, or to Hellenize it or Grecicize it, trapezocracy. Just like 1991 unveiled Marx's error, 2008 exposed Adam Smith's. The great C process, the commodification process, the commodification drive, gave rise to a sorry litany of C words that have darkened our prospects and have been browning our planet. Credit crunch, carbon, Copenhagen. The past 2 years have destroyed our collective and individual fig leaves. From now on, business as usual would be a fast track to a multifaceted ruin. Today, society is breeding a troubled generation, the generation of the tens, created by 2008, just like the generation of the 30s, was created by 1929, a generation with nothing to look forward to but a browning humanity. We are in the throes of a crisis of our own collective making, which cries out for a collectively argued, reasoned, and implemented solution. This is the juncture we find ourselves at now. But what kind of solution can we fashion? How can we rise to the occasion, bringing about catharsis rather than catastrophe? I submit that yes, we can opt for the former against the latter. As someone said, yes, we can, some time ago, before he forgot about it. But not unless we tackle some awful demons first. Let me be more precise on Adam Smith's error that 2008 unveiled. Yes, as I said before, markets are indispensable for producing and distributing things. But it is awful at creating and distributing ill-defined assets. When humanity leaves to the market assets like real estate, human labor, collectively produced knowledge, finance, debt, our genetic makeup, rivers, lakes, the great oceans, the atmosphere, the environment in general, we are courting catastrophe, leaving it to the market. And when society tries to overcome market failures by creating more artificial markets, it elevates the problem onto a higher level at which it becomes more problematic, more pernicious, more dangerous. The end result at the present moment in history shows that we end up with not just greater inefficiency, but also with more illiberty, or if you want, less liberty. We ended up today living in a world in which nothing pays like grand failure. Wall Street and the City of London are just one example. There are many more. I think Marx would have had his revenge when he realized that this is the motto we live under today. I'll give a number of examples that seem to be at odds with one another, but I feel that they fall under the same heading. Real estate. Do I need to say more? I won't. Finance. Commodification and unfettered financial markets pushed finance's share of United States income from a mere 4% in 1971 to more than 40% in 2007. It also inflated the values of derivatives, which are, as Iraklis said, taken on face value as instruments for ensuring against crop failure or low demand. They're excellent tools, but as we all know, excellent tools can have appalling uses. The value of derivatives in 2000 was $70 trillion globally. In 2007, it was $700 trillion. To put it simply, the planet was just not big enough for the size of the world of free market finance. But let me move on to things that I know less of and you know more of. The TRIPS agreement that Professor Solson mentioned yesterday, which was struck in the mid-1990s, the so-called trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, bundles together disparate products: films, music, software, solar technology, pharmaceuticals, genetically modified organisms, seeds. Thus, it grants the multinationals the right to charge high markups to make profit, regardless of whether what they are peddling to the public is a CD, a DVD, the formula for a life-saving drug, or a seed that was previously bred by generations of Polynesian or African farmers before it was slightly modified by Monsanto in the lab. Look at the incentives, that word that economists love, which our world is laboring under. Our institutional setting is telling multinationals, as we speak, to ignore malaria and to invest in tooth whitening, since markups are more likely to come from the latter. It is motivating pharmaceutical manufacturers to indulge in disease mongering in the West, while ignoring diseases that kill millions of people in the poor South. It is rewarding life-saving innovations by egging monopolies on to restrict their dissemination. This is how monopolies make money, by restricting the supply of what they are producing. It is ensuring that solar technology, for instance, the inventors of solar technology maximize their rewards by restricting the utilization of their new solar technologies. As Dr. Spock would have said in Star Trek, it does not compute, Captain. Medical research. Until the 1990s, this is something I've been reading recently, most medical research was carried out in our great and good universities, some in not so good universities. Today, 70% has been privatized. The new commodity is, and this is not my jargon, it's the industry's jargon, the ready-to-recruit patient, an Eastern European or a jobless American, who becomes a guinea pig in exchange for either money or treatment. A process of commodification which created a system where a private doctor makes more money recruiting a patient than by treating her. To me, this is a business model from hell. Now, if I had more time, or perhaps an opportunity to give a second talk, I would have articulated similar arguments about the inanity, the sheer idiocy of the current crop of market-based remedies for the debt crisis that 2008 bequeathed humanity. On both sides of the Atlantic, mechanisms utilizing newfangled forms of derivatives to sort out the mess left by the older sorts of derivatives. But time is a relentless driver, and I must press on. Because the big question is, what now? Do you know the one about the bus that has fallen off a cliff? Of all the passengers, apparently one is calm and confident. Guess who it is? The faithful economist, touchingly convinced that by the time the bus hits the ground, the laws of demand and supply will have equipped all passengers with a parachute. Question. If we discovered, this was inspired by the astonishing projection next door earlier, for those of you who were lucky enough to see it. If we discover that a comet is heading towards Earth, what would we do? If we knew that in 20 years' time, let's say, it can be measured accurately, our planet would be devastated by it or by some asteroid. Would we leave it to the market to provide a solution? Would we utilize mechanism design and game theory to engineer a new market that would incentivize entrepreneurs and distribute and allocate and price risks in order to do something about it? Hell no. We would scramble NASA, the military, the world's nuclear arsenals, Chinese, Russian, American, European scientists to do something about it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, a comet of sorts is heading our way. We need a proportionate response. One that does utilize the markets where possible, but one that crucially transcends them. Humanity, to put it frankly, needs a new human genome, come Apollo, come Manhattan Project, the purpose of which should be to produce technological solutions that are absent today, solutions that we haven't had yet. All sorts of gizmos will result from such a large-scale scientific, political, economic research project. But the basic business of saving humanity cannot be left to the markets. It is not a matter of regulating the markets. It is a matter of bypassing them and creating alternatives to them where needed. Some may be wondering, is this guy an economist? Bypass markets? Indeed, most of my colleagues claim that the solution to global warming, for instance, ought to be market-based. Most of my colleagues argue in favor of an emissions trading scheme, an ETS. That is, for the creation of a market for bads, as Iraklis was saying, rather as opposed to a market for goods, a market for bads. Pollution is a bad, it's not a good, it's not like apples and oranges. The idea is also called cap and trade. The number of permits to produce carbon dioxide, or